I slammed my laptop shut so hard the screen flickered. "You cannot be serious," I said, voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. "You just rewrote the entire opening section again. We had this locked 30 minutes ago." Mara Quinn leaned back in her chair. Arms crossed the small tusks at the corners of her mouth, flashing when she smirked. Her black hair was slipping from its loose bun, and the neon sticky note stuck to her monitor read, "Fix Mercer's soul in purple ink." "And you cannot be serious about starting a City Hall presentation with 3 paragraphs of compliance benchmarks," she shot back. "No one is going to fund a family services platform that sounds like a tax audit. They need to feel it, Mercer, not just read the numbers. We were 3 weeks into sharing the shoebox office on the 12th floor of Halcyon Civic Partners, and the air already tasted like burnt coffee and mutual homicide." I opened the file again, scrolling to her latest massacre of my slides. "This is operational credibility, not a TED Talk. The city doesn't hand out 7-figure contracts because someone told a cute story about a goblin family eating quesadillas." Mara rolled her eyes so hard I half expected them to stick. "Those quesadillas are real families in Bridgeport who spent 6 hours filling out the same form 4 times because our system still thinks every household has one neat species box. If we don't make the deck human, Alvarez is going to yawn and walk out before slide 5. She was right. I hated that she was right. I also hated that her version, loose, warm, full of actual people, made my clean, logical structure look like a spreadsheet wearing a suit. I exhaled through my nose and forced my voice back to professional. "Fine, we keep your story opener, but we cut the family photos on slide 4. They look like stock images from a cereal commercial." Mara's eyes narrowed. "They are real families. I took those photos myself last month during outreach." Of course she had. That was the problem with Mara Quinn. Nothing she did was ever just work. Everything came with context, with faces, with stories that refused to stay inside neat columns. I was still glaring at her when the first email of the morning hit both our inboxes at the exact same second. From Adrian Vale, CC Graham Knox. The subject line was simple and terrifying common root. "Deck revision before 10 a.m. Adrian's instructions were surgical. Graham's reply, which arrived 11 seconds later, was the exact opposite. The 2 ex-spouses had been divorced for 3 years, yet they still managed to weaponize every project by turning their direct reports into human shields. Mara and I read the emails in silence, then looked up at each other across the narrow desk. She spoke first. "Your move rules, Guy." I cracked my knuckles once, just once, and opened the master file. This was how every single day had started since the project board decided cross-department bonding meant stuffing the 2 of us into one room. 3 weeks ago, I had walked in at 7:22 a.m. to find her leather jacket already draped over the opposite chair like she owned the place. A half-drunk cold brew, a tiny succulent, neon sticky notes everywhere, and a purple pen lying diagonally across the center of the desk, like a declaration of war. Her nameplate had appeared overnight. Mara Quinn, Strategic Client Lead. I had stood there, Americano cooling in my hand, and realized the new coordination room for Project Common Root was no longer mine alone. She had walked in 3 minutes later, small and quick orc-human hybrid, in a gray sweater and black pants ears, just a fraction too pointed tusks just visible when she smiled like she was daring the world to comment. "You must be Elliot Mercer," she'd said, as if we'd already been arguing for years. And we'd been arguing ever since. About file names, about slide order, about whether the word seamless was inspirational or nauseating, about the fact that she ate donuts before 10 and I aligned my pens to the desk edge like it mattered. But the arguing had started doing something dangerous. It had started working. By 8:45, we had torn the deck apart and stitched it back together 6 different ways. Her warmth, my structure, her real families, my hard numbers. The hybrid version was good, better than good. It felt like it might actually survive a room full of city bureaucrats who hated surprises. We sent the final file at 9:08 separate versions to each boss so both could feel slightly victorious, and rode the elevator down to the 18th floor conference room in tense silence. Mara bit into her second donut. I reviewed the checklist. Can you not eat in the elevator? No. The sugar smell is everywhere. You sound personally offended by happiness. The pre-presentation meeting was supposed to be routine. It wasn't. Adrian sat at the head of the table like a budget cut in human form. Graham stood by the screen laser pointer spinning like a toy. They didn't look at each other. They never did. 10 minutes in, Graham called it too stiff. Adrian called it the first slide that actually sounds serious. I suggested they fight over the script outside so the rest of us could work. Mara looked at me like I'd grown a spine made of titanium. Then Deputy Commissioner Rosa Alvarez arrived 15 minutes early with 2 staffers. No rehearsal. Real thing. Right now. The HDMI cable refused to work. IT didn't pick up. My laptop flickered. Graham offered to just talk. Adrian looked ready to commit murder. Mara stepped onto the conference table, took the laser pointer from Graham's hand, and smiled at Alvarez like they were old friends. Rosa, if you give us 2 minutes, I'll show you something more useful than a screen. Alvarez folded her arms. 90 seconds. Mara turned to me. No words, just a look. I understood instantly. I pulled up the offline dashboard. She grabbed the whiteboard and drew the current nightmare journey for a multi-species family trying to register a birth in Chicago. I read the rejection rates. She turned the numbers into the story of a Bridgeport couple who had spent 6 hours proving they were allowed to be a family. We moved like we had rehearsed it for months. She knew when I needed to drop a statistic. I knew when to shut up and let her breathe life into the data. We stepped around each other's weaknesses without thinking. 13 minutes later, Alvarez set her iPad down and said the words that changed everything. Whatever I just watched in the first 90 seconds. Don't do that this afternoon. Whatever happened after that, do exactly that. When the room cleared, Graham told me he liked me. Adrian told me not to disappoint her. Mara laughed like the whole thing had been inevitable. That afternoon we presented again. It wasn't perfect. Graham texted mid-meeting. Adrian emailed corrections. The screen still glitched. Mara forgot to unmute once, and I had to pull the mic back for her. I spoke too fast through the integration data, and Alvarez told me to breathe. But the rhythm was there. Every time she expanded too far, I pulled her back. Every time I made it too dry, she added heat. We understood each other without speaking. The room felt it. Alvarez felt it. At 4:18, she gave us the verdict. You two are the first team that made this feel both buildable and human in the same hour. Later in the pantry, Mara leaned in the doorway while I refilled my water. I just thought of the worst thing that could happen. I don't want to know. I think we work well together. I set the cup down. Professionally, that's the scary part. The next 2 weeks blurred into a series of small wars that somehow kept winning. There was the night we stayed until 2 a.m. fixing a critical bug. She cussed at the code. I built the rollback plan. She discovered I was afraid of heights when she opened the window for fresh air. I discovered she bit the tip of her tusk when she was concentrating. We solved the bug anyway. There was the Interspecies Day team building where we got paired to build a bridge out of recycled materials. She lifted beams with that quiet orc strength. I arranged the load-bearing points. We won. She made me trip on the final sprint, and I caught her by reflex. We let go like we'd been burned and pretended nothing happened. There was the pilot at Bronzeville Community Services Hub. A furious orc mother stood up in the middle of the test and demanded to know why the form erased her extended family network. Mara sat down at eye level and admitted the system was wrong. I patched it on the spot. Alvarez watched us and said, "You two did something more useful than smooth." Every victory made the rumors louder. Someone stuck a printed label on the coffee machine, OPS. Times strategy equals unresolved tension. Another appeared on our door, do not separate, may explode. We ignored them, or tried to. By the end of week 3, the pilot report was due in 48 hours, and both ex-bosses had sent conflicting last-minute demands. Adrian wanted it stripped to pure data. Graham wanted it dripping with human stories. Mara and I stayed until 10 p.m. The office empty except for the low hum of the air conditioning and the glow of 2 monitors. I didn't need to speak anymore. I raised an eyebrow. She knew I needed the raw metrics. She tapped her fingers in a certain rhythm. I knew she had a breakthrough. We moved around each other like 2 parts of the same machine that had never been designed to fit but somehow did. At 10:17, we hit send on the final version. The office lights were off except for the blue glow of the screens. Chicago outside the window was a river of distant headlights and neon. Mara leaned back in her chair, rubbed her eyes, and looked across the desk at me. We stared at each other for a long second. Then, at the exact same moment, we said, "We did good." No high five, no smile that lingered too long, no accidental brush of fingers, just the quiet, uncomfortable truth that we had become the kind of pair other people noticed, the kind that finished each other's thoughts without trying, the kind the entire company had started whispering about. I closed my laptop. She closed hers. And for the first time in 3 weeks, neither of us argued about whose turn it was to turn off the lights. That was the real problem. Because the worst thing wasn't that we worked well together. The worst thing was that I was starting to notice how well. And I still didn't like her. Not even a little. Not yet. 3 days after that first City Hall presentation, the entire company had decided on 2 things. 1, Common Root actually had a shot at landing the contract. 2, Mara Quinn and I were either about to murder each other in our shared office or had already slept together, and the Slack channels were running 2 separate betting pools with real money. I knew this because someone had printed a sticker and slapped it on the 12th floor coffee machine, a cartoon of 2 wolves snarling at each other above the words OPS times strategy equals unresolved tension. I peeled it off. 10 minutes later, a new one appeared in the exact same spot. Mara leaned against her desk, chewing ice from her cold brew like it was a competitive sport. The sound was deliberate and infuriating. You know, the more you rip them down, the more they'll keep sticking them up, right? I don't live to optimize other people's entertainment. Shame. I thought optimizing everything was your love language. Can you chew ice with your mouth closed? No. Why? Because it's fun. It would have been simpler if the only fighting happened inside our room. But Common Root had moved into the pilot phase. And pilot phase meant every executive who had nodded politely in the approval meeting suddenly vanished, leaving us with an 86-page requirements document and a room full of real Chicago families ready to tell us exactly how stupid our system was. We had to drive to the Bronzeville Community Services Hub that Friday for the first live test with 12 multi-species households. City Hall wanted to watch real people register births, fill forms, link school records, and navigate healthcare all in one place. Adrian wanted flawless process. Graham wanted warm and human. Both of them were coming to watch. I had briefly considered faking my own death on the red line just to avoid the trip. I drove. Mara rode shotgun with 2 bags of documentation, a box of pastries, 3 highlighters, and the kind of restless energy that made me suspect she could puncture a tire with attitude alone. I still don't understand why you check the address before we leave. Like Google Maps doesn't exist, she said, already peeling the lid off her second coffee. Because Google Maps isn't responsible if you accidentally turn onto a no parking street. You think I can't read signs? I think you get distracted easily. By what life? By everything. Mara rested her head against the seat. You must be exhausted living like that. I sleep fine. That sounds impressively bleak. I handed her the checklist. When we get there, you handle family coordination and on-the-spot reactions. I'll monitor data flow and intake process. You hand out assignments like you're running an evacuation drill. I hand out assignments so people understand what to do. No, you hand out assignments so people do exactly what you say. I consider that a feature. Of course you do. The Bronzeville Community Services Hub was a renovated brick building with a small courtyard out front and murals of every species holding hands. Inside, it smelled like weak coffee, fresh printer paper, and disinfectant. Deputy Commissioner Rosa Alvarez was already waiting camel coat on tablet in hand like it was surgically attached. Mercer Quinn. She nodded. Good, you're early. I'm always on time, I said. Mara jumped in. I'm on time too, just in a more creative time zone. Alvarez actually laughed. If this goes well, I might forgive your first day. If it doesn't, I replied, feel free to blame us. It's tradition at this point. Mara shot me a sideways look. Did you just make a joke I'm not confirming? The pilot started normally enough. 12 families, every combination imaginable. A dwarf orc couple with twin toddlers who refused to sit still. A human elf pair with a sleeping newborn. An older human orc couple who wanted to know why the system forced them to pick only one primary language when they spoke 3 at home. Mara slipped into what I had started calling her dangerous mode, soft, quick, and somehow making every person feel like they were being led without realizing it. She remembered every kid's name after 10 minutes. She knew who needed things explained slowly, who hated computers, and who would cooperate if you just smiled at them once. I tracked the data stream. That was when the first real problem hit. The household type field was lumping every multi-species family into a single catch-all code. If entered that way, school district records would bounce into manual review and delay everything by at least 2 weeks. I need Luis on the line. Now. Luis, our lead engineer, picked up on the third ring, sounding half asleep. Mercer, please tell me the building isn't collapsing. Not yet. But your form mapping is about to get me killed by City Hall. Mara spun back from the testing stations the moment she heard me describe the bug. She listened to 3 sentences and understood the entire problem. How long for a fix? Luis sighed like his life was a series of betrayals. Client side, only 2 hours. If we touch back end, 2 hours is too long. I cut in. Mara held her hand out for the phone. I gave it to her. Luis, it's Mara. Listen. In the next 2 hours, I need a temporary front-end display so users don't get shoved into the wrong flow. Back-end later. I don't need it pretty. I need it so nobody walks out mid-session. Luis was quiet for 2 seconds. You sound like you're holding a knife. I'm holding your career. Close enough. He laughed tiredly. Fine, I'll push a front patch. I took the phone back and looked at her. Do you always threaten the tech team? Only when they deserve it. There are more polite ways. Yes. But none of them are faster. The real problem wasn't the bug. The real problem walked in 10 minutes later, Danica, a middle-aged orc mother who stood up in the middle of the room when she realized the temporary form still had no field for extended family networks, the kind where aunts and uncles who aren't blood still raise the kids. You say this project is for every family, but every time we get to the tribe section, it makes us shove our people into a little note like an attachment. The room went dead quiet. That was the exact kind of moment that could kill a pilot on the spot if you answered wrong. I started to step forward. Mara stopped me with one fast glance. Let me. She didn't apologize with corporate language. She didn't say, we'll take that feedback. She pulled up a chair and sat at eye level with Danica. You're right, she said simply. We missed that. Not because it doesn't matter, because the people who designed the first version assumed every family looks the same. Danica crossed her arms. And who are you to tell me I'm right? Someone whose non-blood aunt still drove me to school when I was 6, smacked me when I was 12 for cursing, and still has a key to my apartment. A few people in the room chuckled softly. Danica's shoulders lowered a fraction. Mara kept going. If you give me 5 minutes after this session, I'll rewrite the language in that section and add your family's case as a priority note, not to placate you, because you just showed us where we're wrong. That was when I stepped in. And on the system side, I can confirm that if we add this field as a proper household relationship cluster, it will flow through schools and healthcare without hitting manual review. Danica looked at me. I understood half of that. It means if we fix it, you won't have to refill the form 3 times. Ah. She sat back down. Say it like that next time. When the test session ended just before 4, both Mara and I were drained. Alvarez pulled us into the hallway. I'm not saying that was smooth, she said, because it wasn't, I answered. But Alvarez continued, you two did something more useful than smooth. You stayed in it. Mara closed her tablet. That sounds like a very Chicago compliment. It is. On the drive back, we didn't argue right away. That was the first abnormal thing. Mara opened the last pastry box and offered me one. I don't eat sugar before 10, I said on reflex. It's 5 at 12. I took it. She stared straight through the windshield. You almost ruined the moment with Danica. I know. You walked up with your "I'm going to explain the process in 3 layers of jargon" face. I was only trying to clarify Elliot. Her voice wasn't joking anymore, just direct. Not everyone who's angry needs to be clarified right away. Some people just need to be told they're right first. I drove another block before answering. I'm not good at that part. I know. That sounded unnecessarily rude. Truth usually does. I exhaled through my nose. Fine, I'm not good at that part. But you almost promised something the current system might not even be able to deliver. If I hadn't promised, we would have lost her right there in the room. I'm not saying you were wrong, you're just saying I took a risk. And you're saying I strangle everything until it can't breathe. I pulled over into a temporary parking spot outside the office. Mara turned to face me fully. Her expression wasn't playful anymore. This was the real argument. I know you think I'm reckless, she said. But do you realize you treat people like variables that need to be tamed? I treat the work like work. No, you treat people like work. I turned toward her. And you treat the system like it will magically work if you just read the room well enough. At least I remember who the system is supposed to serve. And at least I know if there's no system, nobody gets served at all. She gave a dry laugh. You always have to win, don't you? I don't need to win. I need this not to explode. You think you're the only one who wants that? No. I thought you liked being seen as the rescuer more. The second the words left my mouth, I knew I'd gone too far. Mara went completely still. Not loud anger, just silence with the power cut. She unbuckled, grabbed her bag, and got out. I called after her, Mara. She slammed the door hard enough to rock the car. That night she didn't come back to the office. I stayed until 8:46 cleaning the pilot report, logging bugs, writing follow-ups for Alvarez, and staring at the empty desk across from me for 3.5 hours with a feeling that was unreasonably uncomfortable. I knew I had hit exactly the spot I shouldn't have touched. Not because the sentence was too harsh for office standards, because it was too accurate in the cruelest way, half right, half completely wrong. I opened our chat to apologize, typed "I went too far," deleted, typed "in the car I deleted." Finally, I closed the screen. The next morning, I arrived on time. Her desk stayed empty. 7:41, 7:46, 7:52. I hated how often I checked the clock. At 8:03, the door opened. Mara walked in with her cold brew hair pulled tighter than usual, faint shadows under her eyes, face cooler than normal. She set her bag down. No greeting. I stood up. Last night, we have a call with Alvarez at 8:30. Mara. She looked up. You were half right, she said, first voice even. I do like being the rescuer. Because if I get there fast enough, no one has time to file me under the category they already decided for me. I stayed quiet. She breathed out and pulled her chair in. And you were wrong to think I do it for attention. I nodded slowly. I'm sorry. She tilted her head, evaluating whether the apology met standards. I'm not good at this, I said. The saying it the right way part. No. You're good at it. You just hate doing it when there's no template. I should have been annoyed. Instead, I almost laughed. I'm still sorry. Accepted. So we're good. Not yet. She opened her laptop. But we have work? Then she slid a second paper cup across the desk. On the lid, written in purple ink, no sugar, because I pay attention too. I looked at the cup, then at her. She didn't look up from her screen. Don't make it a thing, she said. I just need you functional for the call. I sat down and picked up the hot coffee, and knew I had taken one very small but very clear step into a different kind of danger. We still didn't like each other. We still argued. We still said things that would make any outsider think we should be separated immediately. But from that morning on, I started to understand one thing. If I ever spoke like an asshole, Mara wouldn't stay silent and disappear forever. She would come back, throw the truth in my face, and then set the exact right coffee in front of me. And somehow, that made everything more confusing than every system bug combined. Pilot Week 3 brought the smell everyone at Halcyon feared most. Not burnt coffee from the pantry, not overheated printers. Money. The budget report landed in my inbox at 8:17 a.m. with a subject line that made my stomach tighten. Common route. 18% overage on vendor adaptation and localization. Adrian had attached a 3-page memo explaining exactly why creative overreach was the cause. Graham forwarded it to the entire strategy floor with one line noted: "Poetry remains illegal downstairs." Mara read both emails at the same time I did. She didn't speak for a full minute, just tapped her purple pen against her desk in that rhythm I now recognized as her version of counting to 10. Then she said, "One of them is going to make us the bullet in their war." I closed the report. Both of them already have them. 10 minutes later, my calendar pinged 1-1 with Adrian in 15 minutes. Mara's pinged at the same second 1-1 with Graham. We sat across from each other in silence for 10 of those 15 minutes. No arguing, just the low hum of the air conditioning and the knowledge that we were about to be used as evidence in a divorce neither of us had asked to witness. Mara spoke first. "If one of them tells me to collect bullets to shoot the other, I'm charging hazard pay. I'll log it under expenses." She almost smiled. "I hate how reasonable you make that sound." My meeting with Adrienne was short and surgical. She stood by the window, arms folded, no offer to sit. "Budget overage," she said, sliding the printed report across the desk. "Explain." I scanned the numbers. Vendor adaptation, localization, compliance matrix, user testing, all inflated. But the line items didn't match the actual work we had approved. "There's something off here," I said. "I know. That's why you're here. You think Graham greenlit expansions without routing them through ops. I think you're going to find the hole." That was Adrian at her best. Even furious, she spoke in complete, precise sentences. Before I left, she added, voice low, "Mercer, don't let Quinn turn this into theater." I didn't answer. Mara came back from Graham 28 minutes later looking like a combination of exhausted, amused, and ready to set something on fire. "Let me guess," I said. "He told you Adrian is strangling the project." "Close. He said she's trying to turn it into a washing machine with the city logo on it, almost the same thing." She dropped the folder on her desk. "How was yours? Adrian told me not to let you turn this into theater." Mara planted both hands on the desk and looked at me. "Perfect. They're still divorced and still using us as their lawyers." We stared at the budget file together for a long minute. Then Mara tapped the line for vendor adaptation. This didn't come from my side. "I know." "How?" "Because we never approved any vendor that week." She looked up. "You remember the timeline for week 19 I built it?" "Okay." She pulled her chair closer. "So either someone is retro-charging Common Root or someone is using the project as a hiding place for other costs." I met her eyes. She didn't blink. "You're suggesting we go off books," I said. "You already know what I'm suggesting." I did. Following proper channels meant each of us carrying suspicions about our own boss back to the chain of command. The project would stall. City Hall would smell blood. Whatever was wrong would have time to bury itself deeper. Going off books meant we were exceeding authority, and if we got caught, we both burned. "I don't like operating without formal access," I said. Mara opened her drawer and pulled out a temporary green access card. "Lucky for you. I make friends with people who have formal access." "Where did you get that, Luis?" "You bribed the tech team with donuts again?" "No." I brought donuts and threatened his weekend. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. She looked up. "Where are you going?" "Down to the data floor." "Oh." She grabbed the card and stood too. "You're in?" "I haven't decided on the safest way to say no yet." Reasonable. The data floor was exactly as depressing as it sounded. White lights, low ceiling, constant server hum, and the faint smell of cold plastic. Luis opened the door looking like we had volunteered for root canal surgery. "I know nothing," he said immediately. "We haven't asked anything," Mara replied. "I still know nothing." I spoke clearly. "I need access logs for every vendor adaptation charge from week 16 through 21. Luis clutched his chest. "Mercer, if I give you that without sign-off, Adrian will use my bones for furniture." Adrienne doesn't know? That's the part that worries me more. Mara leaned against a server rack, voice soft as velvet and twice as dangerous. Luis. If this is retro charging like I think it is, the first person they'll come for is you because everyone will ask who let the invoices through. Luis looked between us, sighed like a man digging his own grave, and typed. 30 minutes later, we had what we needed, and it was worse than I expected. A string of invoices from a vendor called Gray Peak Outreach Solutions had been routed through Common Root's budget code. The initial approver wasn't ops or strategy, it was finance, specifically Nathan Bell, CFO. Mara let out a low whistle. I never liked that man's face from day one. I don't like anyone who hides costs in someone else's project. You don't like anyone who talks too loud in the pantry. That's a very long list. We spent the next 3 hours tracing the trail back in our office. Gray Peak on paper was a community consulting firm. In reality, they had done 3 projects for Halcyon's biggest competitor, specializing in perception adjustment before major bids. Translation, they cleared the way and bent public opinion. Bell is using Common Root to fund his own private lobbying team, Mara asked. Working theory. You always sound like a legal disclaimer. And you always sound like a lit match. She tilted her head. Be honest. You like me when I'm the lit match, don't you? I looked up from the screen. The sentence had come out of her so naturally she almost pretended it meant nothing. Anyone else would have laughed, flirted back, or changed the subject. I did the worst possible thing. I like you when you have evidence. Mara burst out laughing so loudly 2 people in the hallway actually looked in. Oh my God. You are the worst possible update to flirting. I wasn't flirting. Yeah, that's the problem. That night we stayed until almost 10. At 8:17 we both looked up from our laptops at the same moment, both exhausted, both silent. Chicago outside the glass was black and glittering. The river reflecting strings of distant lights. The office was empty except for the air conditioning hum and faint jazz drifting up from the editing floor below. Mara rubbed the back of her neck. I hate the CFO. I hate hidden costs. I hate that we're fixing this instead of the people who get paid enough to not create it. I hate that you refuse to use headphones when you're on calls, finally. A topic you actually care about. I should have argued. Instead, I found it funny. Are you hungry? I asked. Mara stopped moving entirely. Did you just offer to feed me? That was an overly dramatic interpretation of a normal social behavior. Elliot. She leaned back, looking at me like I had started glowing. Are you asking me to get dinner after work? No. I'm asking if you're hungry so I can order something and you don't have to eat gummy bears for dinner like you did last Tuesday. You track me, I have eyes? Wow. So romantic. I withdraw the offer. Don't. She picked up her phone. Pad Thai or burger? You sound like someone who doesn't forgive loose sauce. You already know me too well. No, I'm just getting started. The sentence was quiet. Not joking in the old way, and it stayed in my head longer than it should have. We ate cold burgers at our desks among printed invoices. Mara stole my fries because you never finished them. I pushed the ketchup bottle away from her pile of papers. She told me that if I ever died at my desk, it would definitely be because I tried to control the ketchup. I told her she would be the reason the entire project exploded one day, and she would still find a way to make it look charming. At 9:43, we had a mostly complete picture. Bell wasn't skimming money directly from Common Root. He was using the project's budget to pay for a fake community survey that gathered real pilot data to feed a separate merger deal with a private housing developer. In plain language, he planned to take data that trusting Chicago families gave us and turn it into a commercial model for profit. If it came out, Common Root died. City Hall would sue. Halcyon could lose the contract and its reputation. Who do we tell? Mara asked. That was the hardest question of the day. Adrienne would cut Bell's throat if we had hard proof, but Bell sat higher on the board than she did. Reporting too early gave him time to erase everything. Graham would turn it into a public bomb within 12 minutes and the company would burn with it. We need the full logs and confirmation from a source outside Bell's account, I said. Without that, it's still just suspicion. Mara nodded slowly. Then she looked at me longer than usual. You know what the funniest part is? I have a bad feeling. I trust you with this more than I trust Graham. I set my paper cup down. I trust you more than I should trust anyone on strategy." She gave a small, dry laugh. "That sounds dangerously close to a halcyon love confession. Terrifying. Absolutely horrifying." But neither of us laughed right away. We just looked at each other across the desk covered in invoices, the smell of cold fries, the white office lights, and the distant city outside. If anyone had walked in at that moment, they would have thought the room had simply gone quiet from exhaustion. I knew better. It had gone quiet because in one short second I realized the thing pulling me toward Mara wasn't only efficiency anymore, and I hated that realization. "I'll stay another half hour to export the logs," I said, voice drier than I intended. "Fine." She bent to gather papers. "I'll go refill the coffee." She walked to the door, then stopped on the threshold. "Elliot." "I'm listening." "If everything blows up tomorrow, remember I hated you first. I'll put it in the minutes." She smirked. "Good." The door closed behind her. I looked at the blinking log screen, but all I could hear was the way she had said "I trust you" like it was nothing and somehow heavier than almost every kind thing I had heard in the past year. If there was one day in the year that aged me faster than any other, it wasn't the first City Hall pilot, it wasn't the day I started sharing an office with Mara, and it wasn't the morning. Both ex-bosses emailed me within 60 seconds of each other. It was Tuesday at 11:14 a.m. when an anonymous PDF hit every inbox at Halcyon Civic Partners with the subject line "Potential Conflict of Interest in Common Root Leadership." I opened it at the same moment Mara did. She was still holding her cold brew. By the time she reached page 2, she set the cup down so gently the ice didn't even clink. That was how I knew it was bad enough that she didn't feel like pretending anymore. The document was clean, professional, and vicious. It claimed Mara had failed to disclose close family ties to a network of Southside community providers organizations her stepfather had once given legal advice to during his time as a community advocate. No proof she took money. Just enough smoke to suggest every outreach decision she made might have tilted toward those groups. In other words, a dirty enough hit to bleed her slowly without killing her outright. "I have zero financial interest in any of those organizations," Mara said, eyes still locked on the last page. "I know. You know because you ran the entire vendor chain yourself. I know because if you actually had a real conflict, you wouldn't have been stupid enough to leave fingerprints like this." She looked up, almost smiled. Almost. 10 minutes later, HR called her upstairs. 15 minutes after that, Adrian called me. The meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. "Common Root cannot carry this right now," Adrian said. "Until legal clears that Quinn is off active facing duties. You know this is a targeted strike at the project." "I know. Procedure doesn't change. Bell is behind it." Adrian looked at me straight. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet." "Then don't state it like a conclusion in my office." I clenched my jaw until it hurt. She softened her voice by half a notch, which somehow made it worse. "Mercer, I need you steady. Do not make this personal." I should have said yes. Instead, I said, "It became personal the moment one of you or Graham started using her as a shield." Adrian went still. I knew I had gone too far. Too late. She sat down, hands folded on the desk. "Get out before you say something you can't take back." I walked straight down to the 12th floor. Mara had already cleared most of her desk, not much, just the little succulent 2 notebooks, her cup of pens, the empty cold brew, and the thin scarf she sometimes threw over the back of her chair. In 20 minutes, the space across from me looked twice as cold. "Where are you going?" "Legal says work from home until they finish reviewing." "Do you have your own lawyer?" Mara zipped her bag. "You're asking like a gentleman who's being unusually decent today. I'm not used to it. Answer me." "Yes." She pulled the zipper shut. "My mother already sent me 2 phone numbers and 3 creative ways to curse out HR the second the document leaked." I stepped closer. "I'll send you the full vendor logs." "Don't." Her voice sharpened. "Elliot, don't do anything stupid. You just got pulled off the project because an anonymous file aimed straight at who you are. And if you send internal data to me right now, they'll have another reason to say I manipulated you. You didn't manipulate me." She looked at me, then gave a small, tired smile that hurt more than I wanted it to. That sentence sounds even worse now. I stood right at her desk. Mara, what? Don't look at me like you're about to do the right thing and set yourself on fire for it. I didn't answer right away, because she was right. I hated that about her. She read me too fast. I hated even more that some part of me wanted to be read. She slung the bag over her shoulder. Listen. Her voice dropped. I'm not going to break just because I'm off the project for a week. I know, you don't know everything. Then tell me. Mara stood still for a few seconds. You think I joke so much because I like keeping things light. That's not it. She met my eyes. I joke first because it's the only way people don't have time to file me under the box they already picked. Too human for orc. Too orc for human. Too soft for strategy. Too sharp for client relations. Too small to threaten, but different enough to be remembered longer than anyone else's mistakes. Something tightened in my chest. Mara. You can't save me from how people look at me. You get that, right? I looked at her hand gripping the strap of her bag, gripping too tight. I'm not trying to save you from how people look, I said. I'm trying to make sure you don't have to stand alone while they do. She turned her face away fast, but I still caught it. Then she breathed in. That's the dangerous part about you, Elliot. You're not the first person to say that. No. But you might be the only one saying it for this reason. She left. I sat in the suddenly too wide room for 20 minutes. Graham called me up half an hour later. I don't believe Mara had anything to do with this, he said the second the door closed. Then say it publicly. Adrian A. will call that me breaking protocol. You're letting her get suspended because you're scared to fight your ex-wife. Ex-wife, Graham corrected on pure reflex. Doesn't make it better. He poured himself a whiskey, even though it was barely past lunch. I'm keeping the board from jumping in faster. What do you think I'm doing? I think you're used to putting other people in front and calling it strategy. Graham laughed dryly. Mercer, the longer you're around Quinn, the more you sound like her. No, I'm just running out of patience for adults who treat their divorce like city infrastructure. Half an hour later, I left his office with temporary access to the vendor approval email archive, something Graham had gotten by calling in an old favor from a board member who owed him. I knew I was sliding deep into the no procedure zone. That night, I took my laptop to Mara's apartment in Logan Square. I didn't text first. That alone was already an alarm bell for me. Her place was on the third floor, small but bright windows looking down on a tree-lined corner, open kitchen, low bookshelves, one worn green armchair, and 3 unwashed glasses in the sink. A magnet shaped like a pig wearing glasses stuck to the fridge. Mara opened the door in an oversized sweater, sweatpants, hair in a messy knot, no makeup and exhaustion she wasn't hiding. She looked at me, then at the laptop bag. You step through this door, and it's officially outside company policy. I brought the data. Oh, romantic as hell. Are you letting me in? She stepped aside. If I don't, my neighbors will think I'm keeping an abandoned accountant in the hallway. No one thinks I'm an accountant. You have spreadsheet energy. I walked in. For the next 3 hours, we sat on her living room floor, surrounded by cold pizza, 4 open laptop screens, email logs, legal files, and the anonymous report. Mara read fast. I read deep. She spotted the language designed to sound innocent but poison everything. I spotted the watermarks, timestamps, and forwarding chains. We argued over the evidence. The way we argued over everything: sharp, quick, honest. Why do you keep obsessing over metadata when the wording already shows the motive was aimed at me? Because motive doesn't hit keys. The person who hit the keys left the prints. You always want to find the hand holding the knife before you look at the wound. And you always jump into the blood before you identify the weapon. She tossed a slice of pizza back into the box. Great. 2 different trauma responses sitting on the same rug. I looked up. You call it trauma? Mara leaned against the sofa, staring at the ceiling. I joke a lot. Doesn't mean I don't know what to name things. I stayed quiet. After a while, she spoke softer. You know why I hate being pulled off the project more than being accused? Why? Because I hate being turned into a liability in the exact thing I helped build. She spun a pen in her fingers. It took me years to get people to see me as the person running the room instead of the person who needs the room explained to her. I set my laptop aside, and I said, hate the feeling of watching something break from a distance and not being able to stop it. Mara tilted her head. Family. I gave a humorless smile. That obvious. You're the kind of man who wasn't born in control. You learned it. I leaned back against the sofa, eyes on the slice of light under the window. My dad gambled. Not movie gambling. No mafia, no underground, just a man who always believed the next hand would fix the last one. Mom worked 2 jobs, then 3. I was the 16-year-old who knew exactly which day the electric bill came and how many days of groceries we had left. The older I got, the clearer it became if I didn't keep everything in order, something would fall off the table. Mara didn't interrupt. That let me keep going. Later, I lived alone. Everything was cleaner, more predictable. Fewer people could break it. Until I sat across from you. Yeah. She smiled small. Then without warning, she shifted closer on the rug. Not touching. Just closer. You know how ridiculous this sounds? She asked. No. I didn't trust you from the beginning because you were nice. She looked down at the papers. I trusted you because you never treated me like the exception. You got mad at me for being loud, for being messy, for editing files without asking. Not because I'm half-orc, not because I'm small, not because I'm a woman, just because I genuinely annoyed you. I'm trying to figure out why that's a compliment. For me, it is. I turned toward her. At that distance, I noticed details I had never let myself notice before. Faint freckles near her temple, slightly puffy eyes from lack of sleep, a smudge of purple ink on her index finger, the tiny tusk that showed when she smiled but disappeared the second her face went serious. I'm not letting them use you as a sacrifice for this, I said. Mara held my gaze long enough that I started regretting how blunt it sounded. Elliot, she said quietly, that's the kind of sentence that makes people kiss you. Everything in the room seemed to pause half a beat. I knew I should joke it away. Stand up, go back to the screen. Instead, I asked, are you planning to? Mara looked at my mouth, then back up. No, she said. 1 beat. Unless you want me to. I had passed the age where feelings arrived like lightning. Most of the time, they arrived like an elevator going to the wrong floor, quiet, until the doors opened and you realized you were somewhere else entirely. I leaned in slowly. The landline in her kitchen rang. Mara closed her eyes and swore under her breath. I laughed before I could stop myself. She threw a throw pillow at my chest and stood up to answer. 10 minutes later, she came back with a face that had gone cold again. Alvarez. Bad news. There's an internal hearing with City Hall tomorrow afternoon. Bell already moved first. He says if Halcyon can't explain the personnel leak and vendor conflicts, the city will consider freezing the pilot. I stood up. So we're out of time. We're out of time. She looked at me. I looked at her. And we both understood the same thing from this point forward. If we wanted to save the project and pull her out of the line of fire, we had to publicly pick a side, which meant picking each other. The hearing with City Hall was scheduled for 1:30 p.m. the next day in a small conference room north of the river. No grand auditorium, no press, just Deputy Commissioner Rosa Alvarez, 2 lawyers from procurement, a data privacy rep, and Nathan Bell sitting at the far end of the table in a charcoal suit that looked too clean for the mess he had made. I arrived at 12:55 wearing the pale blue shirt because the white one still had yesterday's coffee stain. Mara showed up 2 minutes later in a dark green blazer, hair pulled tight, face set in the exact expression she used when she was pretending the world hadn't already tried to file her under risk. Adrienne waited outside the door like a budget cut wearing heels. Graham stood at the opposite end of the hallway, hands in his pockets, smiling the way people smile when they're watching a car accident they helped cause. Mara stopped beside me. For once, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, and the same silent agreement from her living room floor last night settled between us again. Today we picked each other first. Inside the room, the air smelled like stale coffee and expensive cologne. Alvarez opened the meeting with the politeness that always precedes bloodshed. We only need clarification on a few concerns. Bell started before anyone else could breathe. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. Because Common Root was presented as a trust-based platform for vulnerable populations, any appearance of undisclosed affinity networks and outreach leadership becomes materially relevant. I hated the sentence so much I almost laughed. Alvarez turned to Mara. Do you wish to respond first? Mara slid a printed copy of the anonymous report across the table, then followed it with our compiled log packet. Her voice stayed level. First, I disclosed every community tie during onboarding. Second, I hold no ownership compensation board seat or advisory role in any listed organization. Third, the anonymous filing deliberately conflates family proximity with financial influence. Bell tilted his head. Intentional is a strong word. I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward the room before he could finish the thought. Then let me use stronger ones. I walked them through the timestamps, the access routes, the invoice metadata, the forwarding chains that all began inside Bell's finance account and ended at Grey Peak Outreach Solutions. Mara picked up the thread the second I paused, pointing out how the language in the anonymous report matched the exact phrasing Grey Peak had used in 3 previous competitor bids. No shouting, no dramatic fist on the table, just 2 people who had spent weeks learning each other's rhythm, finishing the proof the way we had finished every bug, every pilot glitch, every last-minute deck revision. Alvarez listened without interrupting. When we finished, she looked straight at Bell. Did you authorize Grey Peak at any level? Bell's answer came too fast. Grey Peak was discussed only at an exploratory stage. I clicked to the final file, the draft contract we had found between Grey Peak and the private housing developer using Common Root pilot data as the foundation for their community conversion model. Alvarez's voice dropped. That's the project. The room changed direction in a single quiet second. No one raised their voice. No one slammed anything. They simply stopped looking at Mara like she was the problem and started looking at Bell like the hole everyone had been standing over. Bell tried to speak again. The city lawyer cut him off with a single raised hand and turned to procurement. I want him nowhere near this contract. Alvarez closed her tablet. 3 weeks, she said. Direct oversight. One mistake and I freeze it myself. The 2 of you will run point ops and community. No intermediaries. Every vendor review open to the city in real time. I said yes at the same moment Mara did. We sounded like one person. Outside in the hallway, Adrian stopped me before I reached the elevator. You went around procedure. Yes. You embarrassed a board officer. He embarrassed himself. Her mouth moved in something that might have been the ghost of a smile. Good, she said quietly. Don't make me regret backing the extension. Graham reached Mara a few steps away. He slid his hands deeper into his pockets and gave her the same half-amused look he used when he knew he had lost, but still wanted to look like he was in control. You were terrifying in there. Mara answered without missing a beat. You hired me for exactly that. Graham glanced at me, then back at her. If you 2 ever leave and start your own shop, I'll sue out of pure jealousy. I'll send you a postcard, Mara said. On the way back to the office, we didn't go straight upstairs. Mara said she needed air. I should have gone back to the 72 unread emails waiting for me. I walked with her instead. We crossed the bridge over the river. Chicago wind hit us straight in the face, cold and honest. The sky was the color of wet concrete, but the sun still found cracks to shine through. People hurried past with coats buttoned high, pretzel carts, steam taxis honked in the distance. Halfway down the next block, Mara slowed. I thought I was going to throw up during the hearing. You looked like you wanted to bite someone. That's my throw-up face. I'll make a note. She stopped at the corner, turned to face me fully. The wind pushed a loose strand of hair across her cheek. She left it there. Elliot. Yeah, you chose me before the project today. I stood still. The city kept moving around us, loud, impatient, alive. I chose the project, I said first. Mara just looked. I exhaled. And I chose you. She didn't smile. That made the words heavier. Terrible, she said softly. Why? Because I did the same thing. No phone rang, no ex-boss interrupted, no CFO, no board, no pilot deadline, just a windy Chicago corner and two people who had argued enough to recognize every sigh the other made. I stepped closer. Mara. Don't make it sound like a merger proposal. I don't know a more romantic way. Jesus, you are a certified disaster with a degree. I was planning to kiss you. She blinked, then shook her head once helpless like she'd given up trying to fix me. At least that's the most direct sentence you've ever said. So I'm improving, annoying as hell. But she didn't step back. The first kiss wasn't movie lightning. It wasn't the city fading away behind us. It was warm. It was right. Mara kept one hand fisted lightly in the front of my coat. I slid my palm to the back of her neck and pulled her in the last inch. She tasted like coffee and winter air and the faint metallic edge of the city. She kissed the way she worked, straightforward. No performance, but always leaving an exit if I turned out to be an idiot. I didn't take the exit. When we broke apart, she looked at me for a long second and said, "Okay." "Okay, what?" "Okay, you kiss better than you write follow-up emails." I'm not sure if that's a compliment. It's not. She hooked two fingers into my coat pocket and tugged me forward again. It's a warning. Don't get cocky. 3 weeks later, we had redone almost every vendor process, built a new oversight group with City Hall, opened a transparent dashboard, and rerun focus groups in Bronzeville, Pilsen, and Rogers Park. Some nights we fought for 2 hours over the wording on a single form. Some nights we fought over the thermostat like children. Some nights I snapped at her until she told me I should marry a scanner because it was more predictable than she was. Some nights she tossed a protein bar at my chest and said, "Eat. You're glaring at that spreadsheet like it insulted your mother." Some nights I draped my coat over her shoulders on a site visit because she had forgotten hers again, and she said, "If you tell anyone about this, I will deny it and call you a liar." But we never went back to the way it was before. Because underneath every argument, every sharp remark, every moment we still called each other exhausting, there was a new line pulled tight between us. Not soft, not easy, just real. The final day of the 3-week extension, Alvarez signed off on moving Common Root into limited rollout. Halcyon kept the contract. Bell was placed on indefinite administrative leave, corporate speak for fired, without the paperwork drama. Adrienne and Graham were ordered by the board to restructure reporting lines so they could no longer drag their direct reports into their personal war. The final result, HR decided Mara and I no longer needed to share an office. Healthy boundary, reset the email called it. I stood in front of the new seating chart with my name in 12B and hers in 12D and felt an absurd, unreasonable irritation. Mara stopped beside me, arms crossed, staring at the same chart. "You're mad because we finally get peace and quiet? I'm evaluating HR's competence." "Oh no, you're going to miss me. I'll miss having someone disrupt order right in front of me so I know where to intervene." "That sounds suspiciously like missing me. I can live with it." She smiled. Liar. I turned to her. "Have dinner with me." She blinked. "Tonight? Not in the pantry. Not between bug reports. Not in the middle of a hearing. A real dinner." Mara tilted her head, pretending to think. "I need to know what kind of dinner this is. The kind where I pick you up at 7, the kind where you are not allowed to bring your laptop, the kind where, if you call it a stakeholder alignment meeting, I will cancel the reservation. You already made the reservation. I live with plans." Terrifying. "Are you coming?" She looked at me longer than one beat. Then she reached up and straightened my collar like it was the most serious task in the world. "Yes," she said, "but I'm warning you in advance. What now? I will still argue with you. I'm counting on it. And if you send a follow-up email after the date, I will block your number. I'll consider it. You'll fail. High probability." She smiled, took my hand for exactly 3 seconds, then let go because someone was walking down the hall. I looked at my empty palm and knew one clear thing. Nothing with Mara had ever been easy. It probably never would be. We were both too stubborn, too sharp, too used to handling our own chaos without letting anyone else close enough to touch it. But for the first time, I didn't see the difficulty as something that needed fixing. I just saw it as real. And in a company where everyone was better at wearing suits than at being honest, real was worth more than any contract. Mara nodded toward the new seating chart. You know the funniest part? I have a feeling you're going to tell me whether I want to hear it or not. Correct. She leaned her shoulder against the board. They separated us because they thought it would reduce complications. HR has always been optimistically stupid. Mara smirked. Yeah. Then she glanced at me, eyes bright and familiar. But you and I both know the complications were never because we shared a room. I looked at her then down the long halcyon hallway where afternoon light spilled across gray carpet and glass doors reflected the two of us, standing side by side like we had always belonged exactly there. Yeah, I said. And this time I didn't feel the need to rearrange the sentence into something safer or cleaner or less true. Because with Mara, everything worth keeping had always started a little out of alignment. And somehow I had stopped hating that so much.